By the end of this video, you'll be able to create a simple coding agent using the Claude API and Python, automating tasks with ease. You'll learn how to set up a project and make your first API call. This is useful because it saves you time and effort by automating repetitive coding tasks, allowing you to focus on more complex and creative problems. To get started, you'll need to have Python installed on your machine, along with a code editor or IDE of your choice. You'll also need to sign up for an Anthropic account to get access to the Claude API. Once you have these set up, you can create a new Python project and install the required libraries. We'll be using the request library to make API calls to the Claude API. You can install this library by running pip install requests in your terminal. Now, let's create a new Python file called coding_agent.py and import the request library. By following along, you'll have a basic coding agent up and running in no time, and you can start exploring the possibilities of the Claude API. Your first step is to sign up for an Anthropic account and get your API key ready. By the end of this, you'll be able to set up a new Python project that's ready to interact with the Claude API. First, you need to install the required libraries. You'll need to install the Claude Python library, which is the official Python client for the Claude API. To do this, open your terminal and run the command pip install Claude Python. This will install the library and its dependencies. Next, you need to set up your Claude API credentials. You can do this by creating a new file named credentials.json in your project directory. In this file, add your API key and API secret, like this. API_key, your_key, API_secret, your_secret. Make sure to replace your_API_key and your_API_secret with your actual credentials. Now, create a new Python file named agent.py in the same directory. This is where you'll write the code for your agent. To use the Claude API, you'll need to import the library and load your credentials. You can do this by adding the following lines to the top of your agent.py file. Import Claude and Claude key equals your_key. Again, replace your_API_key with your actual API key. Now you're all set to start building your agent. Your next step is to try running the Claude Python library to test your setup. By the end of this, you'll be able to make your first API call to the Claude API and set up your new coding agent. You got your project set up. Now it's time to start coding. First, you need to install the Claude API client library for Python. You can do this by running pip install Claude API in your terminal. Once that's installed, create a new file called agent.py. In this file, you'll write the code to authenticate with the Claude API and create your new agent. To authenticate, you'll need your API key from the Claude dashboard. Save this as an environment variable called Claude_key. Then, in your agent.py file, import the Claude library and use the authenticate function to set up your API connection. Next, you'll create a new agent using the create_agent function. This function takes a config object that defines your agent's initial capabilities. You can define these capabilities using the claude.md syntax in a file called config.claude.md. For now, keep this simple. Just define a basic agent that can respond to a few coding prompts. Here's what your agent.py file should look like so far. Python, import OS, import Claude, Claude.authenticate, os.environ Claude-ky. Agent equals Claude.create_agent, my_agent, config.claude.md. And your config.claude.md file should have some basic config like this. Markdown, coding, Python. Now you've made your first API call and set up your new agent. Vocabulary, authenticate, capability, config, Claude API. By the end of this, you'll be able to define specific tasks your agent can perform and handle responses from the Claude API. You're building a small coding agent with the Claude API and Python, and now it's time to make it more useful. You'll define agent capabilities, which are essentially the tasks your agent can perform. For example, your agent might be able to write a simple Python function or generate a Claude.md file. To do this, you'll create a new Python module. Let's call it agent_capabilities.py. In this file, you'll define functions that correspond to the tasks your agent can perform. For instance, you might have a function called generate_world that uses the Claude API to generate a hello world program in Python. Once you've defined these capabilities, you'll need to handle responses from the Claude API. This means parsing the API's output and using it in your application. You'll use the request library to send API calls and the JSON library to parse the responses. Let's see what this looks like in code. You'll create a new function, handle_response, that takes the API response and does something useful with it. With these pieces in place, you'll be able to integrate your agent's capabilities into your Python application. Now, go ahead and create that agent_capabilities.py file, and we'll fill it in with some real code. Vocabulary, capabilities, integrate, parse, generate. By the end of this, you'll be able to test and deploy your small coding agent built with the Claude API and Python. Testing is crucial to ensure your agent works as expected. You'll use various inputs to simulate real-world scenarios. First, create a test file named test_agent.py. In this file, import your agent class and create an instance of it. Then, define test cases that cover different coding tasks, such as code completion or code review. Use the Unitist framework to write and run these tests. For example, you can test your agent's ability to complete a code snippet by calling its complete_code method and asserting the response is as expected. To deploy your agent, you have two options, locally or on a server. For local deployment, you can simply run your agent script using Python, and it will start listening for inputs. For server deployment, you can use a framework like Flask or Django to create a web interface for your agent. You'll need to install the Claude API library and import it in your project. Then, create an endpoint that receives input from users and passes it to your agent for processing. Once you've deployed your agent, you can start automating coding tasks with the Claude API. You can integrate your agent with your favorite IDE or code editor to streamline your workflow. With your agent up and running, you'll save time and increase productivity. Now, go ahead and create that test_agent.py file and start testing your agent with various inputs to see it in action. Vocabulary, deployment, automation, Unitist, endpoint. By now, you've got a basic coding agent up and running with the Claude API and Python. Great job! You can find a complete workflow on our GitHub repo at GitHub repo link. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button to stay connected for more practical developer tips. Now that your agent is live, let's think about what you could do next. There are a few key areas where you can extend its capabilities and make it even more powerful. 1. Subagents. One way to enhance your coding agent is by adding subagents. Subagents allow parts of your system to specialize in specific tasks, making the overall system smarter and more efficient. For example, you could create a subagent that handles complex mathematical calculations or another one for handling data validation. 2. Hooks. Another powerful feature are hooks, which let you define custom behavior when certain events occur. This could be useful if you want your agent to perform actions like logging errors, pushing updates to other systems, or even triggering alerts based on specific conditions. 3. Exploring anthropic documentation. To get deeper into the possibilities of the Claude API, head over to the official documentation at Anthropic Docs link. There, you'll find detailed guides and examples that can inspire new ways to integrate Claude into your projects. Don't be afraid to experiment. Sometimes the most innovative ideas come from exploring less obvious features. So, take a break for a moment, grab some coffee, or tea if that's more your style, and start brainstorming how you could improve or expand your coding agent. Maybe it's time to add some complexity with subagents or hooks, or perhaps you'll dive into the documentation to find even more exciting possibilities. Go ahead and pick one of these ideas and start prototyping right now. You can always come back here for more guidance if needed.